All right, welcome back everybody. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at Project 2, Spaceship Interface, and that's just the way they have it titled in the Arduino Starter Kit. This Spaceship Interface has some LEDs that we're going to kind of flash on and off, and depending on whether or not we're pressing a button, determines the behavior of variations in the LED setup that we have. Now, one of the things that I want to do in this very first project that includes code as well as a circuit design is the very first thing I want to do is I want to take a look really quick at the functionality of the circuit, because I'm confident that with beginners taking a look and seeing the behavior on this very first program, again, that involves both code as well as the circuit, is going to be very useful. So in this program, what I want to do is we're going to start off and we're going to take a look at the circuit first, and we'll jump back into this series looking at the code here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and take a look first and see what the output of this project is ultimately going to produce. All right, so this is the circuit from a functionality perspective. And the only thing that I really just kind of want to pay attention to right off the bat is you'll notice the green LED is turned on immediately. And only when I press this button do the two red LEDs cycle. And you'll notice that they cycle at quarter-second intervals, right? On, off, on, off at quarter second. So let's take a look at this really quick. And again, here I just want to kind of notice that the input goes into pin 2, so we can read an input, and that determines which outputs we're going to provide, whether it's low, off, or high, on. And again, just notice that when we press the button, we complete the circuit, we get this cycling effect. So with that being said, now that you've seen what the functionality of the board actually is going to produce, let's go ahead and dive back into our code really quick. Okay, now that we've looked at the actual circuit, let's go ahead and dive into the source code itself to understand what we are programming to get those results. Now here in our startup, and this is really every application that we write in Arduino, we're going to have a setup function as well as a loop function. Setup, it happens one time only at the very beginning of the execution, and then the loop happens continuously. And within the loop is what we want to kind of display for the user, right? So if we want something to flash or twist or twirl or anything else, we're going to put that in the loop function, and we're going to continuously do that so that our circuit behaves accordingly. But the setup only happens initially. There's never a secondary call to setup or anything else. It happens one time. And so with that being said, the first thing I want to do here is look at the variables that we are going to use to initialize our Arduino board that determines which pins, in this case, are going to write out whether the power should be on or power should be off to our LEDs. And here we have our two red LEDs. Red pin or red LED 1 is the top pin or the top LED that you saw a moment ago. The red LED 2 is the middle LED, the red LED between the green and the red. And then the final one is the green LED that you saw at the very bottom on the circuit here in the videos that we just looked at previously. Now, in order to set those up, we obviously need to have our pins defined. In this case, we have 3 for our green pin, 4 for our red pin, and 5 for our first red pin. And that basically means these are the pins that we are going to use to write out high or low. High being turn on, low being turn off. Now, before we can determine what we are going to actually provide to those pins, we need to read in a value. And what we are going to do is we are going to read in our values before we write them out to 3, 4, or 5. We are going to read in the values from pin 2, and we're going to store that value temporarily into our switch state variable. And so all that we're looking at here is we're looking at the 2 red pins, or the 2 red LED pins, and the green LED pin, in this case it's 3. And we're going to write those to output, and we're going to read in on pin 2 whether or not we've depressed the button. And when we read in that value, whether or not we've depressed the button, we're going to store that into the switch state. Here, let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like for initialization. Now, again, initialization, we only want that to happen one time, so therefore we put the initialization of the board into our setup function. And here what we are going to do is we are going to put we're going to set up our input pin, in this case pin 2, as input, and we're going to set up pins 3, 4, and 5 as output, meaning we expect to read data on pin 2, i.e. our switch input sensor pin. That's what we want to read input from. We need to know if somebody's pressing the button or not. And then we're going to write out to our green and our red LEDs on 3, 4, and 5 to determine whether or not we want to turn those LEDs on or off, right? And that can cycle, but the cycling happens on our loop function. This is just configurations telling the board, hey, be prepared to read in on pin 2 and be prepared to write data out on pins 3, 4, and 5. That's all that this is doing for our setup. Now, what we need to do is configure our loop next. Now, the loop has a little bit more code, so we're going to kind of expand things here. All the stuff that's pretty small here, that's virtually unreadable, it's the code that we've already looked at. So focusing on our loop, the very first thing we want to do is read in whether or not the user is pressing the button. And we're going to store that on the switch state. Are they pressing it or are they not? And that, if they're not, it goes to low. If they are, it goes to high. So the very first thing we need to do after reading in the value is determine if the pin is not being pressed. What we are going to do is set the green LED pin to high, meaning turn on the green LED. And if it is, and then we turn off the 2 red LEDs, right? And so if there's no button being pressed, turn on the green light and turn off both the red lights. The next thing is we need to look at whether or not that switch or that button is being pressed. If it is being pressed, we're going to get a switch state of high. And it's binary, right? Low, 0, high, 1, or any other number besides 0. Here we are going to, if the pin is being pressed and we hit the else statement, we're going to say turn the green light off, i.e. low, and turn the red LED pin to low, i.e. turn it off. And this is the middle red LED that we looked at a moment ago. And turn the very top red LED pin, i.e. pin 1, to high. So that very top red LED is going to be turned on, and everything else is going to be turned off. we're going to wait a quarter of a second, and then we are going to switch it where we turn that middle red LED to high. I turn that one on, and we're going to turn off the very top LED, the red LED. We're going to wait another quarter second. We're going to hit this loop immediately. And from there, let's say you're still holding down the button. We're immediately going to go in and we're going to look and we're going to say, okay, keep the green LED off. And you can see the cycling here now between the top and middle red LEDs, where again, we hit it, the button's being pressed, we turn that middle one off, we turn that top one on, we wait a quarter of a second, and then we turn that very top pin on, and we turn that middle pin off, right? And so now we just have this cyclic effect, right? Turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off. And we do that at a very consistent pace here. In this case, it's a quarter of a second. And we start switching those red LEDs on and off. Once we release the switch, we're immediately going to go in and we're going to turn the LED back on to high immediately, and we're going to start this whole thing over. So that's pretty much the total code base for this particular project in Project 2 on our Arduino Starter Kit. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to go back into the board and take a look at how the whole thing is configured so you get a better understanding how this code as well as the board interact together. So in that, we will see you in the next video.